Valencia is a beautiful city that is becoming increasingly popular with tourists thanks to attractions such as the City of Arts and Sciences. And the city's two zoological institutions, the Oceanogràfic and the Bioparc Valencia, are also promoted by the city as part of its tourists' offerings, which already becomes apparent at the airport. Of course, I made sure to check out both places during our visit, and I've already featured the Oceanographic here on this channel, so feel free to also check out that video if you're planning a trip to Valencia. But today we are focusing on the Bioparc Valencia, which has enjoyed an excellent international reputation since its opening in 2008 and has always been highly recommended to me as a top destination. Perhaps also because of its unique focus on African wildlife, which really sets it apart from other zoos. And judging by photos, it always looked like the park offers an incredible immersive experience with backdrops that are hard to match. But did the park actually live up to my very high expectations? Well, to be honest, only partly. So why is that the case? What exactly can you expect here, and why might a visit still be absolutely worth it for you? That's exactly what I'd like to explore with you today. Bioparc Valencia is located in the western part of the city at the end of the iconic park Jardin del Turia. The entrance area already makes a strong impression, featuring an 8-meter tall elephant statue that was installed here in 2018 to mark the park's 10th anniversary. From here, a roughly 40-meter long bridge takes you into the main zoo area. The park covers 10 hectares and is divided into 4 themed zones: savannah, wetlands, the Congo Basin and Madagascar, which is exactly where we are going to start. The first animals you see here are flamingos, which, although also found in Madagascar, are more commonly associated with other regions, so it's an interesting choice. The carefully designed setting with artificial rock formations, waterfalls and lush greenery all around already gives a very good impression of the park's overall thematic approach. Right next to the flamingo habitat is a large enclosure for lemurs, and if the flamingos didn't quite transport you to Madagascar yet, this part definitely will. As you can already see, it's a walk-through enclosure, allowing you to get very close to the animals. It's the kind of experience that you will now find in quite a few zoos. Still, I think it's always a great feature, and seeing how excited my girlfriend was made it clear to me once again, for people who don't visit over 50 zoos a year, this really is something special. What was also quite special for me was watching a fossa leap through the trees with such agility. Of course, it doesn't do that in the lemur area, but rather on its own island. These acrobatic skills clearly show how Madagascar's largest predator is perfectly adapted for hunting lemurs. Compared to the spacious and impressive lemur habitat though, I did find the fossa island a bit too small. And so I entered the Congo Basin with a bit of mixed feelings already, but right away the first enclosure managed to impress with an absolutely stunning backdrop. And the group of animals sharing this enclosure, sitatungas, pygmy hippos, green monkeys and drills, is certainly remarkable. The path continues through a large artificial tree trunk where there's quite a bit to discover, from insects to a dwarf crocodile, which however was lying in a depressingly small pool. The panther chameleon enclosure is much more appealing, even if a few more branches could definitely be added. And then at the end of the tree trunk there is this otter enclosure, not only relatively small, but also featuring just a few puddles. If that's really all there is, this is one of the worst otter enclosures I've seen in a long time. No amount of scenery should distract from that, even if the setting with its mix of artificial elements and Mediterranean flora does manage to create an almost jungle-like atmosphere. The overall design of the Congo Basin area is is generally quite impressive, especially thanks to panoramic views in the style first popularized by Carl Hagenbeck, who pioneered open sideline-based enclosures without visible barriers in modern zoo design. A very good example for this is the enclosure for forest buffaloes and red river hawks, where you can already make out the gorilla habitat in the background, which we'll come to later on. The general focus on mixed species habitats is also a real highlight. Here, for instance, grey-crowned cranes, red duikers and bongos share the same enclosure. The leopards, of course, remain on their own. Their enclosure is quite nicely designed, and thanks to several glass viewing panels, visitors get a really good look inside. But the search for a truly outstanding leopard enclosure continues. One problem is that although the enclosure is covered by netting, it barely offers any real climbing structures. And since it's only one enclosure, depending on how things are arranged behind the scenes, there is the possibility that sometimes only one leopard has access to an outdoor area if the animals have to be separated. By the way, while leopards do naturally live in Africa, that particular subspecies is hardly kept in European zoos, mainly because it's the only one not currently classified as endangered. In this case, the leopards on display are actually Sri Lankan leopards, which are kept here as a representative subspecies. In Africa, leopards are probably the greatest natural threat to chimpanzees. They live here too, in what really is a beautifully designed setting, including another panoramic view of a gorilla enclosure behind it. But if you take a closer look, the facade starts to crumble pretty quickly. For a full chimpanzee family group, the space seems rather limited, although I don't know how much additional room they might have behind the scenes. And the furnishing here doesn't really consists of much more than a stream of water and a few tree trunks. And that's basically it. I couldn't even spot any enrichment like artificial termite mounds. So despite the attractive setting, this is a below average chimpanzee enclosure for me. And when the way it looks and what it offers the animals in practice are this far apart, the priorities simply aren't where they should be. Thankfully, the gorilla enclosures helped calm my nerves a bit, because here in my eyes the setting and the quality of animal husbandry are much more in line again. There are two gorilla habitats here. The one behind the chimpanzee enclosure is designed for what's known as the bachelor group, although I only saw a single silverback there. The larger enclosure on the left is home to the breeding group, which is kept together with white-naped mangabees. Visitors can observe the animals both through large glass panels and across a moat. And inside another artificial tree trunk with more viewing windows, the path even leads right through the gorilla habitat. It's hard to imagine a gorilla exhibit being more thoughtfully designed from a visitor's perspective, and in terms of the animal's needs, the size and above all the furnishing of the enclosure seem far more appropriate than what we saw with the chimpanzees. If everything in this park were on this level, I'd already have a lot less to complain about. But unfortunately, my issues continue as we move into the wetlands area. Here we are first looking through glass panels into the enclosure of the Nile crocodiles, which can be kept outside here thanks to Valencia's relatively warm climate. And while the crocodiles probably don't need a significantly larger land area, the pool did strike me as rather cramped, especially when imagining all three animals being in the water at the same time. The Kitum Cave, named after a real cave in Kenya, is once again an absolutely stunning piece of scenery, and from a design perspective I really have to tip my hat. Watching the hippos underwater is, of course, nothing short of spectacular here. But when the hippo just keeps swimming the same loop over and over again, it still makes me feel uneasy. I can't say what exactly caused that behavior, or whether it happens every day. It might have to do with the fact that there are actually 3 hippos living here, but during my visit only one was in the enclosure. In any case, even aside from that, the hippo enclosure didn't quite win me over. As you have already seen, there are plenty of fish swimming in both the hippo and crocodile pools, but beyond that, the cave also includes several more aquariums. And off to the side there is an area with terrariums for amphibians, though most if not all of them are from South America. That's something I really don't get. After all, there are plenty of amphibians in Africa that could be on display here instead. Also, from inside the cave you get your first view of the African elephant enclosure, and that fits quite nicely since the real Kitum cave in Kenya is known for its so-called salt elephants, which enter the cave to scrape salt-rich rock and supplement their diet with essential minerals. Outside the cave, the path continues towards the elephant's bathing lake, probably one of the most iconic spots in the entire park. The design and the view here have real postcard potential, and if you actually get to see the elephants bathing, that must be an incredible experience. I already found it beautiful just to watch one of the young elephants drinking here. The two youngest of the group were born in November of 2022 and March of 2024. You later can see the elephant habitat again from the savannah area, but since it's fairly tucked in between artificial rock structures, it's still hard to really get a sense of its size. The larger enclosure for the group is said to be around 3,400 square meters, which might not be tiny, but it's certainly not huge either. The smaller enclosure at 1,400 square meters is used as a bull habitat, and that's where I came across Titus again, whom I already knew from Wuppertal and Rhenen. But now we need to take a few steps back, because before we set off on the route through the savannah area, we arrived just in time for a bird and mammal presentation, which, as the name suggests, offers a bit more than your typical bird show. Yes, several birds did fly through the arena, but beyond that there were also porcupines on display and even a red river hawk that really wowed the audience. According to photos on the website, they sometimes even bring out a jackal. Either way, no matter which animals happen to take the stage during your visit, this is definitely something you shouldn't miss, so be sure to plan one of the showtimes into your visit. I can also recommend taking a break at the Samburu restaurant or the Quai Depot cafeteria, although I only had a coffee there, so I can't say anything about the quality of the food. But as you can already see, the view over the African Savannah exhibit is absolutely stunning. Here you will find giraffes, waterbucks, blessboks and even Thomson's gazelles, which are rarely seen in European zoos, along with impalas or ostriches, the beautifully striking saddle-billed storks and several water birds. The path that now leads into the savannah area circles around the entire enclosure, offering a wide range of different views and perspectives, including this one here for example, with a look over the meerkat enclosure, while on the opposite side, behind the porcupines, you can catch another glimpse of the elephants. As you can probably already tell, this entire section and the exhibit itself was designed with great attention to detail. Panoramic views were carefully planned so that just like at Hagenbeck, you can already spot the lions behind the savannah habitat. From the other side, you get a great view into their enclosure across a moat and through glass panels, allowing you to observe the lions up close. As is unfortunately the case with almost every enclosure here, it doesn't stand out in terms of size, but its structure and design are definitely well thought out. And the panoramic effect works both ways, of course. Lions, after all, love to keep an eye on their surroundings from an elevated position. Right next to the lion enclosure, there's also a walk-through aviary, which once again is beautifully designed. Among the species living here are spoonbills, Edmund storks, hammercobs, glossy starlings, and vulturine guinea fowls. And alongside the birds, there are also rock hyraxes. The second large enclosure that the path leads around is home to white rhinoceros, who share their space with Hartmann's mountain zebras. Unfortunately, the enclosure feels a bit barren, and that's not just because of the sandy ground. It also seems to lack a bit of furnishing. The rhinos do have access to water, but I wasn't able to spot a mud wallow. The path around the enclosure leads over a bridge from which you can see the white rhino habitat on one side, and on the other side the enclosure of more gazelles and the sweet little kirkdikdiks. From there, the path continues through a cave from which you can look out into the enclosure of the dwarf mongooses, which were all adorably snuggled up together when we passed by. But the cave also contains larger terrariums for snakes, an extensive tunnel system for naked mole rats, and an enclosure for aardvarks, which were unfortunately asleep when we were there, and the same goes for the warthog family. And then, last but not least, there's this hyena enclosure, where the spotted hyena kept pacing back and forth the entire time. Maybe it was just waiting for something, you never really know. And the enclosure is thankfully larger than it first appears, but it didn't exactly blow me away either. So in the end, this last section couldn't really change my mixed feelings. Because on the one hand, it has to be said, the scenery and overall atmosphere of the park are truly outstanding. I do understand anyone who prefers more naturalistic parks and finds all of this a bit too artificial. Tastes simply differ, but I think most people would agree that when it comes to park design, both in concept and execution, BIOPARC Valencia is really something special. But when animal welfare clearly falls short of the glossy backdrop, and that's definitely the case in more than one area, then you do start to wonder whether the right priorities were set here. There are some extreme examples, like with the chimpanzees, while most of the rest is actually quite okay. Some of the enclosures are even pretty good. But for me, that's still not enough to get overly enthusiastic about the place. Also, I have to say that I really appreciate the clear focus on African wildlife here in principle, but in the end, most of the species kept here are still the standard ones you already know, and even there, some classics are missing, like cheetahs or servals. Actually, there's not a single small cat species at all, which isn't a huge issue and probably won't bother most visitors, but the collection of animals here was not that impressive to me, and that is another smaller reason why in the end I have to say no. BIOPARC Valencia is not one of the best zoos I've visited so far. It's still a nice experience, of course. If you're in Valencia and want to experience African wildlife, I can definitely recommend a visit here. Overall, for me, it's still a good zoo, but beforehand I had expected something more of the lines of, wow, this is a park every zoo enthusiast must see at least once. And yes, as a zoo enthusiast, you should go here if you're coming to Valencia anyway. I'm just saying it probably shouldn't be at the very top of your bucket list, because to me at least it couldn't live up to those very high expectations. But what do you think? Are you disappointed after watching this video? What was your impression if you've already been there yourself? Were you disappointed too, or would you completely disagree with me? Let me know for sure in the comments. And though you can already hit the thumbs up button or the subscribe button if you want to see more zoo videos from me, but before we leave, let's talk about some future plans here. Because there's some really fresh news. More than 60 million euros will be spent on a 3-part extension themed around the historic Silk Road and the cultural links between Africa, China and Valencia. The first section will go from Mombasa in Kenya to Alexandria, with cultural elements such as Egyptian temples or Ethiopian farms, as well as large aviaries, new aquariums and themed play areas. In the second section, Alquerías, Valencian country houses, will be restored to illustrate local silk production, and in the third and largest construction phase, a Chinese garden will be created. There will also be cultural experiences such as tea ceremonies and a virtual reality experience where you can fly over the Chinese national parks on the back of a dragon. However, it is not yet known if there will also be any animal animals living there. I mean, probably it's a zoo, but we don't know anything for certain. In any case, this seems like an exciting expansion, particularly in terms of cultural education. The extent to which this will benefit existing animal husbandry is of course questionable. The Nile crocodiles, for example, could be relocated to provide more space for the hippos as well, but that is pure speculation. I mean, this picture even makes it look like the elephants would be moving, or that there will be a second elephant enclosure on the other side of the park. It should be this one right here then, but there are no concrete informations on that, and it's honestly kind of confusing because it doesn't really fit in this project. In any case, I'm definitely curious to see where this project will be going and whether the targeted increase of 500,000 visitors per year can actually be achieved. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments as well, and if you have been watching this because you're planning a trip to Valencia, don't forget to see my video about the Oceanogràfic as well. And with that being said, thanks for your attention, see you soon, adios, hasta luego, or as we say in Germany, Valencia, deine Augen glühen und saugen mir die Seele aus dem Leib, Valencia, deine Lippen sind die Klippen meines Lebensholdes Weib.